very, very important thing. It's a very important thing. Well, not only. Yeah. It's a gene which is called breast cancer or ovarian cancer or prostate cancer. It's a number of things, but it's primarily known for that. What? Not allowed to say that. You don't do it. It's Jeremy was joking. All right. So now the question is, where did we get up to? Where did we get up to? We got up to Mem Daled Amud Aleph. Yeah. Okay. So we're in the middle of this story of the brisa, which has two scenarios in one that you sell a house or any land or whatever, and then it says you can't testify if you sell us something on, you're not allowed to testify for him because then you're gonna stand to gain. And the second case is if you sell like a movable item like a cow or a talus or whatever, then you can. And the Gemora is puzzled with how to reconcile the two cases, and the solution that we came up with, the Gemara comes up with at some length, which was the solution of Rav Sheshes, is that we're talking about two different cases. We're talking about two different cases. The setup is set up only for the second case. That means the case where there are four people involved, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven steals a cow, steals a piece of land from Shimon, sells it on to Levi. And the halacha is that Shimon, from whom the land was stolen, is not allowed to go and testify and to destroy Yehuda's claim because he stands to gain, right? He stands to gain. What's he going to gain? Because afterwards he's going to go and challenge Levi and say, actually, it's mine. And he wants to keep it with Levi because Levi's easy to deal with than Yehuda. You remember, right? And we asked, but you can have a much simpler case like that. There's only three people involved. You don't need to have to sell it on. You can simply have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. So Reuven steals a cow from Shimon or a piece of land, yeah? Yehuda comes along and claims it's mine. From whom? From the Gazlan, from the thief, from Reuven. Shimon, the one who was stolen from, is not allowed to destroy Yehuda's claim because he stands to gain. What does he stand to gain? Afterwards, he's going to go and knock on Reuven's door and say, actually, I prove it's mine. So you don't need that third, you don't need that extra bit about selling it on. We don't need Shimon to sell it. We don't need Reuven to sell it on to Levi. Again, all we're trying to do is very simply identify a case where a person is not allowed to testify because they are nogea badover. They're going to stand to materially gain. So Shimon cannot testify to destroy Yehuda's claim to the piece of land, right? Oh, why is Levi there? Forget about Levi. Ignore Levi. I'm trying to imagine as if Levi is not there. That's the scenario I'm describing at the moment. Yeah. Right? He's not allowed to testify to destroy Yehuda's claim. Why not? Because he stands to gain. What does he stand to gain? Because he can afterwards go and claim from Reuven.
And then it's Adim, those two different.
Yeah. That's Yehuda's Adim. That's how Shimon is going to defeat him. He's going to say, actually, there's no. He's going to say, actually, there's no thing. There's no the spurious. I don't know, Adim a false or whatever it is, right? Understand? Yeah, makes sense. What's the Gemara's answer? The Gemara's answer is you're right. In the case of land, that would be a perfectly good setup. In the case of land, that's fine. And that's a great scenario where Shimon is not allowed to testify on behalf of Reuven because he stands to gain. Reuven steals the field from Shimon. Shimon can't destroy Yehuda's claim because Shimon afterwards wants to go and get it back from Reuven. He wants to keep it with Reuven, so he stands to gain. Yes? However, if we're talking about a cow, then, and remember, the whole point is the Bryson wants to contrast movable items to land. In the case of a movable item like a cow or anything else, like a talus, like a garment, chattel, then we want to find a case where he is allowed to testify. That's what the Bryson says. He is allowed. And the only case you're going to find where he's allowed to testify is if the stolen goods are passed on.
You can't then go up.
That's right. He can't go on. He can't go now. And that's why the Bryce had to set it up in this way. Because Because he gave up hope when it went to Reuven. That's called Yish, giving up hope. And then you have Shinu Rishus, changed domain. You remember that? Changed possession. Yeah, changed possession subsequent to Reuven selling on to Levi. Yish and Shinu Rishus, which is in Dafyomi all over the place in the Bava as well. You get Muparik Meruba, seventh parak. You give up hope, and then it changes possession after you've given up hope. The halacha is that it's gone forever. It's gone forever. And therefore, because it's gone forever, Shimon is fine to testify on behalf of Yehuda. Not behalf, sorry, against Yehuda.
Because he's not no gain.
He can't get it back. You ask the question, okay, that's fine. He can't get the item back, but he can still go along and claim to Reuven. He can still get the money back. You steal something, you don't get off scot-free.
Oh.
Obviously, you can go to Reuven with a monetary claim. You understand, right? So you still stand to the game. Remember, if Yehuda wins, Shimon's got nothing. Because if Yehuda wins, that means he's proven that he's the rightful owner. In which case, Shimon is telling a lie. So he does stand to gain to keep it with Yehuda, right? Because that allows him to at least go to Reuven with a monetary claim. You understand? So we answered that with another little knetch, and that is Reuven died. And the Mishnah says, again, there's no Dafyomi, it's Wednesday's daf, I think. Hagozel u'machel esponov, someone who steals, and then it's the last parak of Kama, first Mishnah, last parak of Kama, someone who steals and then leaves it to his children. That's machel esponov, because he gave them to eat or whatever the situation is. The halacha is they do not have to repay their father's misdemeanors. Yeah. So since Reuven died, and therefore his possessions passed on to his children. Yeah, these are Reuven's children. The halacha is that Shimon can never get anything back. He can't get the original cow back because you've got Yish and Shini Rishus. It's gone to Levi. And he can't claim money from Reuven because Reuven's dead. And Reuven's children are not obligated to pay off their father's bad debts that came as a result of theft. That's what we did.
Right to land and what own the total.
Pardon?
To say, does that your only apply?
Yeah, that only applies to Metalta. Correct. And that's why we had to have the whole setup with the 4 people. Because really, with land, we didn't need that setup. With land, you could have told me the whole spiel, right? He's not allowed to testify because he's Negeh Vadova, he stands to gain. You can say that with the triangle, just the 3 people, same thing, right? But when it comes to immovable items, that's where we need a scenario where he is allowed to testify, and that can only be created through this picture, this complex picture. So we think, now the Gemara is going to say, actually, there's another way. There's another way. And that is, we don't need a buyer. We just need an inheritor. We need someone who's a Yerush. Why do you need Levi at all? You don't need Levi. Let's get rid of Levi. No. Yeah, just stick with this situation where Reuven dies, so that the land, well, no, it's not land, it's a cow, yeah? The cow now is there.
We need one more child because it's like 8 in them.
Oh, okay, sorry. Well, who's going to get the cow, though? That's the question. That's irrelevant.
Three kids.
3 cows. So the cow is now going off here. There's the cow. Yeah. It's moving. Yeah, the cow is now with Reuven's children. And because of the Reuven's children, that's another case. That's a simple case where Shimon can testify to destroy Yehuda's Edim because he's not going to gain, because he can't get it back from the Yerush. Look at the Gemora, right? That's what basically we're up to. So this halfway down, no, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. Mem Dalad Amud Aleph. V'lo k'mo b'Yerush, asked the Gemara. Can you see that? 7 lines down. Mem Dalad Amud Aleph. The last 2 words on the line. No, again, land doesn't help. Land Hakein and Exelis. So land doesn't matter where it goes. Land can go to sell. It makes no difference. It doesn't transfer. You can always get it back. That's this halacha of Yish and Shini Rishus and everything else and changing domain doesn't apply to land in that way.
If Shini Rishus makes it out of reach, sort of thing.
Out of reach, yeah.
What's Yish got to do with it? Why do you need Yish?
Because Shinu Rishus alone is not Kona. If you just change hands, that's not enough to allow you to acquire something. Similarly, according to many opinions, not everyone, Yish alone is not Kona.
You mean on the button?
Yeah, that's also in Bava Kama about Yish. If you just give up hope, is that enough to transfer ownership? Again, if
it would be a proper transfer.
Again, transferring ownership does not mean that you can't claim monetary compensation. It's a question of whether the item has gone.
Yeah.
You've lost the item. The item. Yeah. All right. So look at the so Gemora asked, why don't we say we're talking about a biyurish? Talking about a yurish. So Gemora says, it's okay, according to one who says okay, so there's a debate about this elsewhere. Those who say that the domain of an inheritor is not the same as a buyer, that's fine. That makes sense, because then you haven't changed hands. If you say that a person who inherits property is not treated the same as someone who buys something, then I understand why we're not talking about a case of an inheritor, because there's no change of domain. We need a change of reshus. We need a change of domain to effect it being lost forever to Shimon, right? But according to one who says that the possession of a person who inherits is the same as as someone who buys, what are you going to say? Okay, let's pause there and see. There's going to be another question, but let's see the Rashbam on that. The Rashbam is about half the way down the wide lines. The wide lines, okay? The Dibra HaMaschel is the word V'hinyach lifneihem, but it's one line after that. It's in the Rashbam. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, but that was on the previous Gemara. We're going on to the one line below that. Umakshinon. Can you see that one line directly underneath that, where the two dots are? Umakshinon l'Rav Shesha. And Umakshinon, we ask as follows: l'Rav Shesha, according to Rav Shesha, is to Okma l'Reisha, who fits the first case in, but Gozal with someone who steals, Mochar, and he sells. So that's why you needed 4 people. Reuven sells it onto Levi, Mishram Sefer, and he says it's talking about that because of the Sefer, because of the latter case. V'loikmo b'yoresh. Why don't we just say we're talking about someone who inherits? Im Isa de begozal u'mochar ma'iri. If we say we're talking about someone who steals and then sells, ubidemis gazlan, and we have to set it up in such a scenario as the thief has died, because that's what we explained, right? Remember? We had to say the thief is dead, because if the thief is not dead, then you still have a vested interest. So we had to set up a whole case that the thief is dead and it's gone to his children, right? So if that's the case, imkain, if so, why did the Tan have to force himself and teach in such a scenario as a thief who sells? Even if the gazlan, the thief, does not sell, nami as well, elo gozal umeis. In other words, also apply even if he doesn't sell. Elo gozal umeis. He's stolen and died. But Kim the Meis, since he's dead, Horish Lebanov. He gave it as an inheritance to his children. In that case as well, you could have found a distinction between the first case and the second case. You understand? The Rosh Hashanah is very carefully picking apart for us what we stand to gain by this question. It's a question on Rav Sheshes. You, Rav Sheshes, who had to set up the whole case with 4 people, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven steals from Shimon and sells it onto Levi. Yehuda comes and claims it. Shimon is not allowed to testify. And in order to understand why it is that with a sheep or cow, Shimon is allowed to testify, we had to create a scenario that that the Reuven's dead and he passed on to his children, and because of that, Shimon doesn't stand to gain. The whole spiel that we explained, there's nothing he's materially gaining. Right. So since you have to create that case, you still can do away with Levi. Because the halacha is that someone who inherits something, it's also out of reach from the person claiming the nigzal, the one who was stolen from Shimon. It's the same, it has the same effect. So we don't need it to be sold anymore. You think so?
That's other ways of Rosh Hashanah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe. What? Could go. What was that?
Shakers. Shakers will go.
Could go. For example, Reuven shegozal soda mishimon. For example, yeah. What is the case? Really, this means i.e. Reuven shegozal soda mishimon. Reuven stole a field from Shimon. But Miss Gazlan, and then Gazlan died. V'yarshu Levi b'nai, and Levi his son inherited it. Right? The also Yehuda, it's a bit confusing. Yeah, that's right. Levi, we're now calling his son Levi. But also Yehuda v'koma areh, and Yehuda comes along and claims it as his own. Lo lezel Shimon, so we say Shimon is not allowed to go. Va'umasid leLevi ben Reuven, and testify for Levi the son of Reuven. The love the Yehuda, and to claim that it doesn't belong to Yehuda. The karka ain't on exelas, because land can't be stolen, as we said. But Hodrele min Ayurish, and it's going to go back to him from the inheritor. And that's why he stands to gain from his testimony. Because if Yehuda takes it away from the person who inherited, loy hodra l'Shimon, it's not going to go back to Shimon. Because wherever the land is, that's where it stays. So, right, that's halacha. We explained this in previous week, right? Yeah, it's going to stay where it is. Avol b'seifo, but in the latter case, shegozal Reuven talis oipara mishimon. That Reuven stole a talis or a cow from Shimon, umeis, and he died. V'yarshu Levi b'nai, and Levi his son inherited it. Also, Yehuda v'koma arer, and Yehuda comes along and claims it. Made lo Shimon olei. Shimon is allowed to testify for it. Why? The eka yish biad Reuven. The Shinurishus biad Levi Yurish. There's in giving up hope in the hand of Reuven and a change of domain in the hand of Levi, who's the inheritor. Derishus Yurish, Gerishus Lekech Domi, because the domain of the inheritor is the same as the domain of the one who buys. And therefore, it will not go back to the nigzal, that's Shimon, the one it was stolen from, neither the cow nor its value. And he doesn't stand to gain from his testimony.
Does that mean his domain is the same as one he buys?
It means basically this, although we put three people, this now we're calling the son Levi.
It's equivalent to Levi.
This is Levi, okay? Now Levi is the same, fulfills the same role, whether Levi is there or Levi is there. That's what it means. Simple. It's the same thing. You get to there, so you'll say to me, okay, great. Rav Sheshes said, I can choose this scenario, I can choose that scenario. But no, because if it was true that this was the correct explanation of this brisa, then it would not have been set up in a convoluted way if you could have said it in a simpler way. Because the Gemora is very simple. You think it's complicated, but it's not. The Gemora aims always at simplicity. We want simple. If you create a convoluted case, one of the best ways that the Gemara will knock out your suggestion is by saying, if it's true what you're saying, if your explanation of this Mishnah or whatever is correct, then why would the Mishnah say that? Why would the Mishnah go to lengths to create a case just to complicate things? You've got to talk about a case where Reuven's dead anyway, because otherwise Shimon is going to stand to gain. It's what we explained. You have to have the case has to be talking about where Reuven's dead. And if Reuven's dead, and there's an inheritor there, and Levi is his son. So don't talk about Levi the buyer. Talk about Levi the son. And you get to the same, effect. You get to the same conclusion, right? You understand? Yeah. Let's just look at the end of Ashbam. And this is what the Tana should have said. It should have said the following case: Gozalo bias for Harish Libnoi. He stole a house and gave it as an inheritance to his son. Ein meid. He's not allowed to testify for him. Simple. Steal a house. You pass it on to your son, right? Shimon is not allowed to testify. Why? Because land can't be stolen. So I stand to gain. I can get it back, right? However, Gozalo Pora for Harish, if he stole a cow and he gave that to his son, to Levi, then Shimon, etc., then Shimon can testify. because then he's doesn't stand to gain because he can't get it back. And the Rashbam says that when he talks about fitting in with an inheritor lavdafka, it's not specifically that. It just means it should talk about, teach a case of a Yerush, not fit it in. And just by the flow of the Gemora, the flow of the Gemora asks a question on Rav Sheshas to Mefarish Umoki Lo Begazlan, who explains that it's talking about a thief. Ka'omar, it says V'lo k'mo b'Yerush, fit it in with a person inheriting. Umiyu, however, b'Yerush lo motzi lo kumon, it could not actually fit it in with a person who inherits. So Akotoni mocha, because it says clearly in the Brisa that he sold it, right? Unless it changes the Brisa to say Horish, that he gave it as an inheritance. So all the Rashbam is telling us here is that although the Gemara asks the question that if it's true what you're saying, Rav Shei says, then you should have fitted it in to talk about as someone who is an inheritor. That doesn't really mean you can't. It doesn't say, it says sale. It says sale. So you can't say it's talking about a person inherits. It talks about a sale. The case in the Brisa is a sale. What it means to say is like this. If your explanation of Sheshas of the Brisa is correct, it should not have discussed Levi as a buyer. It should have discussed Levi as a son. Well, maybe, but it's not the point. The point is that if it's still a knockout blow to Rav Sheshas. Because if your explanation of Sheshas of the Brisa was correct, the Brisa should not have been talking. It should not have set up its case as a sale. Should have set up its case whether a guy inherits. Okay? The Gemora then says, look at the next Rashbam. This is okay. This question on Rav Sheshas is solvable according to the opinion in HaGozel Basra, in the last paragraph of Bava Kama, Alodach Mishnah, on this Mishnah, Rishus Yerush to Gazlan, Lavka Rishus Lekeach Megazlan Domi, that the domain of a person who inherits of a Gazlan, that means to say the son of a Gazlan, is not the same. Lavka Rishus Lekeach Megazlan Domi is not the same as the domain of someone who buys from a thief. Because when it comes to a buyer, there is an inheritance and also a change of domain, right? The Koni, there is giving up hope and also change of domain. The Koni, and he acquires because the buyer is a different domain. Whereas when it comes to a person who inherits, he is like the leg of his father. He's like the extension. And therefore, it's like it's still in the domain of the thief. And he can't acquire it just with giving up hope alone. Because there's no change of domain when it transfers to the son, the inheritor. And wherever it is, it goes back as is to the thief, to the person it was stolen from. No. We're saying like this. We're giving half an answer. We're saying Rav Sheshas would make sense according to the opinion that it talks about a sale, according to the opinion that a person who inherits is not the same as a buyer. Because there is a view elsewhere that you don't effect a change of domain when you give when a son inherits a father. Because the son is karei davur, like the leg of his father. It's just a continuation of the father. That's not change of domain. That's just like correct. And therefore, according to that, it would make sense why the Brisa doesn't talk about this scenario, because this scenario you haven't effected Shinu Rishus, change of domain. So going to ask a question, what about the mission in Bava Kama? Mission in Bava Kama says that if the father passes on to his children, they're exempt from paying back. Why? So that Mishnah which says it fits it in over there in Bava Kama, when they consumed it already. It was not yet, it wasn't here anymore. Therefore, Paturin, they are exempt because it's no longer in existence. That's why they're exempt in the Mishnah of Bava Kama. And therefore, this latter case, according to this opinion, can't be talking about someone who inherits. Because it could not say that the one it was stolen from can testify for the inheritor or lay on it. Because the cow or the garment will go back to the nigzal, the person who was stolen from, if it stays in the hand of the inheritor. And therefore, he is Nogea Be'edus. He stands to gain from his testimony. By destroying Yehuda, he can get it back. So, in other words, what we're saying is that Rav Shesha's approach would make sense according to the opinion that holds that a person who inherits is not like a buyer. Because that makes sense why the price talks about a sale, because that's the only case you can have where this thing is affected, that it's lost forever, and therefore he can be allowed to testify. Correct. That's exactly it. But according to the Mandamar, who says, according to opinion, says, Rashbam carries on, the Kanye Yoresh, who says that the person who inherits it acquires it, even though the theft is still in existence, as it says, the simple reading of the Mishnah in Bava Kama is, he leaves the item in front of his children. So they've got it. They're exempt. Even the theft is still in existence. So in other words, a person Reuven steals a Ming vase, and he gives the Ming vase to his children. Well, he doesn't, but he dies, and the children are left with this item. Okay? The simple reading of that Mishnah in Bava Kama, which I say a few days' time with Daf Yomi, is a person who steals something. V'hiniach lifneim, which means he dies, and it was just part of their state. They find it in the house. The halacha is Paturin. They're exempt. The halacha is Paturin. We had an interesting shiloh, actually, when we moved into our house. Now we turned it all upside down, but before we turned it all upside down, in the attic, yeah, we mamish found treasure. It wasn't an attic, it was like a loft. It was not in the loft. There's only a bungalow, there's only 2 floors, but it was like in one of the cupboards in the loft space, under the eaves. So we found many, many, many coins, like huge amounts of coins, like a jar, jars full of coins, all over the place.
That is in the Gemora. Sure, there's an idea. If he buys a chicken or something,
There's a jewel in.
yes.
Well, there's a famous story of Yosef Moshe Shabbos,
Yes, that's right.
the fish. Yeah, he finds the jewel in the fish. So, so it's interesting. So,
He rents a room. He rents a flat.
right,
He rents a
yeah.
flat. He finds a treasure behind in a cupboard. And the question is, what is his obligation?
Yeah.
To the
Well, there you are. So it's interesting because what do? Do you have an obligation in your bank? Now the guy that we passed over, the estate was the house was what's it called? There was a probate sale, so it was he wasn't alive. He passed away. The man who used to live there. He was a survivor actually. Mr. Beres, his name was. He used to know. I probably met him. Anyway, so it was his children. So the question was, did we need to return the coins to the children? Now, I did some online research, and I found that most of this stuff is not worth that much. It's a collector's item. It was all shillings and halfpennies and all this type of stuff, Remember that? What? Yeah. What is worth? Yeah, well, probably a bit, but what is really worth? It's really worth something. But is if you find, like, for example, coins minted, Edward the what's his name? If amongst all those coins, that's worth fortune. If I do you know how many coins there were? There were thousands. If you find one coin from Edward the what's his name, not Edward the Confessor, whatever his name was, Edward who did not confess, Edward the Eighth, yeah, Edward who did not confess,
Transgressor.
Edward the Transgressor, yeah. then you're serious money because very few were minted. Anyway, we gave it back to the we gave it to the kids, gave it to the sons.
It's worth more than a profit at the value.
Gave it to the sons. And I think that, I don't know, La Halacha, I'm not sure. Did we have to give? Yeah. La Halacha, look, obviously it was the right thing to do, get back. I wasn't keep. I was wondering, La Halacha, have you separated? Did we need to give it back or not? Did we need to go? There was the truth of the Yerushalayim. They inherited it. They inherited everything.
They should have looked through the lot. Surely it's the vendor.
Yeah, but just because you don't look through something, it doesn't mean you're not like.
Yeah, but if you're selling something, and it's
included in the set. There was a famous
buried behind the plaster of the wall or something, but you found it a lot.
I'm not sure if that's right. It's not a fixture. Is that the case? If you find something that's left behind, if you buy a house and you find buried treasure behind the wall, like someone had kept them all their people. This happened to people. There was a lovely case in America. Do you remember? He was on primetime television in America because they bought a house or something. You remember this? Do you remember this case?
It was, I saw the desk.
The desk. There was a fortune of money in it, and he returned it, and he got a lot of things. It was Kiddush Hashem. Yeah.
Shaul Rosen.
Yeah, it was a rabbi. Yeah, it was a.
Shaul Rosenberg. The one in Shakashid, he told us very funny, very interesting.
Yeah.
The Eastern Europeans believe that Jews hide. It's a widely understood belief that Jews hide in the walls of their houses like gold and treasure.
Right.
So apparently some.
Probably some do. Yeah.
So apparently some Jew lost on everyone in the show, and he wanted to go back and see the family home.
Yeah.
He went back afterwards. There was a guy living there. He said, "Don't worry, I'm not trying to take my home. I just want to look for emotional, sentimental reasons." And he walked around the whole place, and the guy followed him sort of sheepishly, nervously, as he looked at every room, and then he left, and that was it. Then apparently he went back many years later. The house was completely destroyed because apparently the guy who followed him, he watched every room. He stripped the plaster off all of the walls, and he couldn't find it. And then someone else heard, another guy heard the story. Another guy heard the story and said, "Oh, the guy didn't look properly. He went back and destroyed the whole house to find the treasure." It's true.
But it's interesting because interesting. There's a case of inheritance there, but here either way, the second this opinion is the Kanye Yerush, the Yerush acquires it, but even though the theft is still there, but even if the theft is still in existence. So according to that opinion, Michael, what are you going to say? Let's say Gazal v'Horish. It should say he stole it and gave it as an inheritance. Why does it say he stole it and then sold it? It would fit very well without a sale, given the misgazla mercury of Sheshes. Anywhere of Sheshes it has to talk about him dying, Ravain. So just talk about a case of inheritance. Okay, so basically what we're saying is, according to the opinion that says that Levi as an inheritor is the same as Levi as a buyer, and it does transfer domain, why not talk about that case? That's the first question that the Gemora has. The second question the Gemora has in Rav Sheshes is, V'oid kasher leila Abaye. The Gemara says, Abaye had a further question. And this second question, the two questions complement each other in Rav Sheshes. The first question is the question in logic, right? If it's true what you're saying, why give a convoluted case? Therefore, you must be wrong. That's the question, right? That's the question on the first question, yes? The second question is very simple in the language. The language, Abaye says the language of the Brisa doesn't make sense according to you, Rav Sheshes. Because his guarantee is upon him or not upon him, that's the phrase that's used in the Brisa. According to you, Rav Sheshes, it should say the Brisa should say because it goes back to him or does not go back to him, because that's the key point. It's not about do you have a guarantee or not. The case about whether you can testify rests on what question? What is the key point? Yeah, are you noger badova? Do you stand to gain? And what defines whether or not you stand to gain? If you can get it back. If you're going to get it back. So with land, I can get it back, and therefore I stand to gain. With a cow, I can't stand. I can't get it back.
Does the guarantee change the analysis?
It's not. No, this is entirely in the language. The language is the implication of that phrase. If you look at the Brisa says, sells him a house and sells him a field. He can't testify. Why? Because his guarantee, that means the guarantee he's got, rests upon him. Well, although he can try maybe and fit that language somehow into the case of Rav Sheshes, it's a bit weird. It doesn't really work. It's not because what does a guarantee mean? Normally a guarantee means I've got a recompense. I've got the ability to go back and say, hey, you pay me, you owe me money, whatever, right? Okay. So in theory, you could explain that phrase that Shimon has got a way of claiming it back. He's got there's a guarantee there from Reuven. He's got a hold on Reuven, or he's got a hold to get the thing back. And therefore, as a result, he can testify. But that's a very, very convoluted way of saying it. It would be much, much simpler if the Brisa would say, you know why you're allowed to testify or not? Well, it depends on the simple factor as to whether or not you stand to get it back. If you stand to get it back, you can't testify because you materially gain. You can't destroy Yehuda because you're going to be able to get it back. And if it's not going to go back to you, you can. That's so.
What was the guarantee talking about? Who was guaranteeing?
Well,
Saying Reuven was guaranteeing Shimon.
In some way, yeah, that's the implication. But but the phrase doesn't really make sense in this context. If Rav Sheshes is correct. So now look, the Rashbam explains this. Abai out of photo goes in the second last Rashbam on the page. But my demokil or Rav Sheshes because mochar, that which Rav Sheshes fits it in about stealing and selling. The Hutzrak Lafarish, and he had to explain and he had to explain those words because his guarantee is upon him, and he explained to mean achrayas v'zchus yesh lemeid alov deidach shumeid loy, because the guarantee and the zchus, the right, there is a right to the person who's testifying, that's Shimon, right, on the one who the one he's testifying for, the Hainu Lokech, which is the buyer.
Say that again.
Okay.
I didn't understand.
Okay, so basically we have to go back now because the first question was saying, why don't we say it's talking about a case of an inheritor? That was the first question the Gemora asked, right? The second question is not going down the same tack, it's a different tack. So let's assume that we accept the case with a buyer. Okay, so Levi's the buyer. Back to square one because we're attacking it from a different perspective. You understand? Yeah. Yehuda is still here, down here, and Yehuda is claiming the land from Levi. Shimon is not allowed to go and try and destroy Yehuda's things because he stands to gain. With land, with the cow he can, with the land he can't. That's what we're saying, right? Now, what is Rav Sheshes going to do with the language of the Brisa? The Brisa says, Mochalo bias, mochalo soda. He sold a house, he sold a field. Ein meid lo allow, he's not allowed to testify on his behalf. Mipnei she'achrayusoy olov. Those are the key words. Those are operative words. Mipnei means the reason. We're giving the reason. What is the reason? Because his guarantee or his right to it, so let's put it like that, his interest, because what's a guarantee? A guarantee means I've got, excuse you owe me money. Something breaks, excuse me, can I have the money back? Right? That's what it means, yeah? So my guarantee or my claim is upon him. So how are you going to explain that word? What does that mean? The only way you can explain it, says the Rashba, is like this. The guarantee or the zchus, the right to the thing, okay? Shimon, who's the one who's testifying here, what's he testifying? He's coming with someone else to destroy Yehuda, remember? That's what he's doing, yeah? Okay? So that zechus that he has against the one he is testifying on behalf of. Who's he testifying on behalf of? Levi. Remember, he's destroying Yehuda to allow Levi to keep it, because that's the whole point. He wants Levi to keep it, because then afterwards he's going to come and claim it himself. Okay, so you have to explain this in this very convoluted way. You have to say that the right that the person testifying, i.e. Shimon, okay, has against the other person that he's testifying on behalf of, which is Levi. That's what you have to say like this. You have to say that the Price is saying this. Shimon is not allowed. Yeah, we're talking about land now. Okay, land. Yeah, right. Shimon is not allowed, not the cow. Land. What?
Land.
No, land. Yeah? Yeah. Shimon is not allowed to testify on behalf of Levi by destroying Yehuda. Why? Mipnei she'achrayutzoi olov, because his right or his guarantee in the item is on Levi. That means to say he's going to afterwards go and knock on Levi's door and try and get it back for himself.
Or money maybe.
Whatever. But the point is that's how you have to, that's the only way you can understand it. Now that's the reason it's been given. That his right to the item, since afterwards he's going to come back with a claim against Levi, therefore we say you can't do it, right? And the Rashbam says that's a very, very convoluted way of saying it, right? V'lomotzinu b'Gemora shum achrayusay olov mefurish kain. Nowhere in the entire Shas do you find the phrase, because his guarantee is upon him, explained in this way. It's never on a buyer. You never have a right or a guarantee from a buyer. The guarantee is always on a seller, right? Yeah, that's what a guarantee is. I can go back to the seller. If I buy a fridge from Samsung, so I'm in this kind of like thing, and I go back and I get a fridge, I guarantee is with Samsung. Do you understand? It's the seller. It's not with a buyer. Okay. You always that's how it always works. That phrase always means, that's how it always interpreted anywhere in the Gemara. Yeah. His guarantee is upon him means his guarantee is upon whom? The seller. I've got a right to claim from a seller. And that doesn't work here in Rav Shesha's setup. Because we're trying to explain why Shimon is not allowed to testify for Levi, the buyer. So you have to end up saying that the reason why he can't testify for Levi by destroying Yehuda's Eidim is because he has a right, he has a guarantee with the buyer to get the land back. That doesn't make it. That's not, that's a very, yeah, exactly, right? And instead, this is what it should have said. It should have said, Mochalo bias, Mochalo Sada. He sold the house, he sold the field. He's not allowed to testify for him. Why? Because it goes back to him. Because he's going to get it back. He's going to get it back. He stands to gain because he's going to get it back afterwards. Mochalo para, Mochalo talis me'edoleho. If he sells a cow, he sells the talis. He can testify for it. Why? Because it doesn't go back to him. That's what it should have said. It should have said something very similar. It should have said, you know why Shimon can't testify on behalf of Levi to destroy Yehud Malach Levi? Of course, he wants to get it back. And the land he can get back, and the cow he can't get back, and that's why he's allowed to testify for the cow and not allowed to testify for the land. So it's very, what we've done.
What's the conclusion?
No, hold on a second. No. Wow, conclusion. Who's not conclusion? Loads of time yet. So the conclusion. All we've done is Rav Sheshes presented, not necessarily tonight, but whatever. Rav Sheshes presented what we thought was a beautiful explanation of this brisa, right? Beautiful explanation. Problem is the Gemara, there's two fundamental flaws with it. The first problem with it is his setup is difficult to understand in terms of the fact that the case of the brisa involved a sale. Because according to Rav Sheshes, since it has to talk about Reuven dying anyway, you should have just talked about a person who inherits. Why talk about a sale? So that's the logical problem with Rav Shesh's approach. The second problem with Rav Shesh's approach is that he has to fit this into a very, very difficult phrase. He has to kind of bend the language to fit his purpose and say that the reason why Shimon, the person who was stolen from, is not allowed to testify is because he has a right to get it back from Levi. But if he's got a right to get it back from Levi, okay, you're not going to use that phrase achrayut, guarantee. You would say something like, I can't testify because I'm going to get the item back. The phrase guarantee is used in respect of a seller, not a buyer. Yeah, okay, you understand? Yeah, I don't have a guess. Levi says, I owe you nothing, mate. That's what Levi says. I bought it from Reuven. I don't owe you anything. You don't have a guarantee with me. You understand? Yeah. So therefore, we have to change everything. Yeah, look at the Ravin Bar Shmuel, says the Gemara. Rather, the way to understand the brisa is totally different, and it's actually like Ravin Bar Shmuel. So we don't actually see Rav Shesh's answer, Jeremy. Remember you said, well, Rav Sheshes, why didn't I think of that? Actually, we don't actually see in the Gemara Rav Sheshes' response. We have a different approach. Rav Sheshes retracts, or he doesn't, we don't know. Ravin Bar Shmuel. Rather like Ravin Bar Shmuel, the Omar Ravin Bar Shmuel, Ravin Bar Shmuel said, B'shmei the Shmuel, name of Shmuel. And now we're going to give a different way of explaining the brisa. A person who sells the field to his friend without a guarantee. Now, if you sell something without a guarantee, what does that mean? It's gone, right? You've lost the buyer beware, exactly, right? Ein me'ed lo allow. He's not allowed to testify on his behalf. What does that mean? He's not allowed to testify. If Yehuda comes along and tries to get it, he's not allowed to testify for him, right? The person he sold it the person he sold it to is not allowed to come and defend and make sure that he keeps it. Okay.
So his,
Mipnei shema amido b'fnei Baal chovo, because he stands to gain. Why?
We finally get rid of these people and create new people. We won't really have time to do much of this now, but we just sort of like set it up a little bit. Pardon? What was that? That's it.
Well, not quite. It's not so much that. Look, I'll show you like this. Let's start with this. Reuven has a field, and Reuven sells the field to Shimon. Okay, very simple. Now Shimon is not a very clever buyer, and he gets no guarantees. Okay, so the land goes to him. Now, what does it mean? No guarantee. No guarantee means that if another person, we'll call him Levi, comes along, and Levi is a creditor of Reuven. The Levi lent money to Reuven. Yeah, so Levi wants his debt back. What's Levi going to do? Yeah, Levi's going to go here and take the land from Shimon. Now, Reuven is not allowed to testify if there's a Yehuda there. If there's a Yehuda there, he's coming along and saying, hey, that land you bought is really mine. Reuven is not allowed to testify together with another aide to keep it in Shimon's possession. Why? Because he's massively gaining. Because as long as the field remains with Shimon, Levi's going to come along, take the field away, and Reuven goes off into the sunset. If the field disappears from Shimon and goes into Yehuda's hands, what's going to happen with Reuven? He's going to have to pay money to Levi. That's called ma'amido b'fnei Baal chovo. He can't testify because he's establishing the field in the hand of his creditor. So he stands to gain. He's going to materially gain. You understand? But Dafka, look at the last line of the Gemora. But Dafka bias so soda. So what's the difference between movable or immovable items? But Dafka bias so soda. This only applies to a house or a field. Avol pora v'talis. When it comes to a cow or a talis, anything movable. Yeah, lo miboya bistoma. Not only bistoma where it's unspecified, the lo mishtab dole, right? That means he didn't designate explicitly that the cow or the talis you, my creditor, should be able to claim from. Then it's obvious that it's not meshubad to him. It's not enslaved to the creditor. He can't claim from it, right? My time. What's the reason? Mataltili ninu, matalti to the bal chov lo mishtabdi. Okay. And movable items are not enslaved to a creditor. So in other words, the creditor can't claim from this thing anyway. So I'm not going to gain because the creditors can't go running after Shimon. You understand? Yeah, right? Because they can't do it. That's halacha. You're not allowed to claim a debt from movable items that have been sold on to somewhere else. If they're still with you, then you can, right? Right? Oh, well, we'll see, right? And even if the cost of miglima dal kasve, and even if he says to him, even from the shirt off my back, which is something you can write in a document that says he's going to even be able to claim from movable items, the creditor, that's only if they actually are in existence. But if they're not in existence, they're not, right? If they're not here, right? They're not here, they're not. I think that means if they're not here. We'll have to see exactly what that means. I think they moved on. Yeah, or no, here because it's been sold on. That's the point. Yeah, even if he made it apotiki. Now, apotiki is like a phrase apotehekoi, which means here it shall be. That means you can specify in the document of loan, in the loan agreement, that this is designated for you to be able to claim from. This cow is your cow, basically, right? Yeah, it's a charge on the cow. Yeah. And I've been my time. What's the reason? Because the Rava says, if he makes his servant a potiki and he sells it, then the balcho mimenu, the creditor can claim from it. He makes his ox or his donkey a potiki and he sells it. The creditor cannot claim from it. My time wants the reason. Highest lekola, less lekola. This one has a noise about it, and the other one doesn't. No one knows. No one knows about that there would be a debt, a charge on a cow. It's not public knowledge. Land, you would expect there to be a charge on it. Here, there's charge land, the equivalent of a land registry, right? But no one knows if Daisy in the meadow has got a charge on her. Do you understand? No one can possibly know about it, and therefore the buyers can't beware. There's no way they can beware. How are you supposed to know where this particular cow has got a charge on, right? And therefore, he's allowed to testify. Do you understand? He's allowed to testify. Yeah? And that's the critical difference between a cow or a piece of land. This cow, if it's a cow, he's allowed to testify. Why? Why?
You can't know.
Because he's not mamid b'fnei Baal Chayvah. By keeping it with Shimon and stopping Yehuda to take it, right? What am I gaining? My creditor can't claim from it anyway.
He might know.
No, not about no. Do you understand? He can't claim from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Again, the whole reason that we can't allow Reuben to testify is if he stands to materially gain. Okay? He's not gaining. Why is he not gaining? Number one, he sold it Shalom Achrai without a guarantee. So if it disappears from Shimon, Shimon can't come back knocking on Reuben's door. The only thing he could be materially gaining from is what? If there is a creditor that Reuben has who are being paid off, that I'm going to get, right? So that's the key difference between land and a cow. Because with land, he can do that. And if I've saved my skin, cow, he can't. Because you can't claim from a movable item because it was a gezerah. Everybody does like land. Everybody does like land. You understand? We'll see the Rashbam in Mitzvah Shem next time. But that's the basic idea. What? Yeah, yeah. All right. By the way, if you're wondering where the phrase "V'glimot al kasvei" comes from, it sounds like a familiar phrase. It's in the